What is a healthy life balance? Is it when you imagine juggling all the things you have to do in your daily life that leave you feeling exhausted, depleted, and like you're burning the candle at both ends? Nope, that's not balanced at all. Finding balance will allow us to learn how to achieve an optimal flow between our health, work, family, finances, fun, and our social lives. Does that sound impossible to you? We don't think so. Today, we hope to give you new ideas on how finding a healthy balance between all of those things is not only doable, but a must for optimal health and well being. Welcome to another episode of Mahogany and Willow. Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, Tiffany.
So, so just to put this out there, Jeanette and I are doing a remote recording of this episode. So if you hear some funny background noises or anything sounds a little off, that's the reason why. So only if they could see the
Absolutely.
video, it would be quite comical.
It would be funny. Our setup is quite hilarious here. And there's going to be traffic in the background for me, so that's going to be a little odd.
Absolutely. There'll be
Yeah,
traffic, there'll be dogs, there's birds singing, and who knows? Anything's possible.
exactly. Exactly.
So with us talking about balance, Jeanette, I have a question for you because I think that you have really good takes on this. What does having a healthy life balance look like for you?
Well, to me, a life in balance would look like for me my ability to flow along with the waves of life freely and easily. That would mean that like say I'm accepting life as it shows up and not trying to control any of it. Um, that's what it really seems like for me when I think about the concept. If I can trust myself, be kind to myself, sit quietly and listen to myself and live my daily life while I'm doing all of those things, that would feel like a balanced life for me. I find balance is generally found right after I'm out of balance. So it's
Mm,
interesting to even think about it. We want balance to be a static thing that we can create in our life when actually it feels to me more like an act of flowing in and out. If we expect balance to be that fixed point or a fixed criteria, it seems like we're never going to really experience it as a consistent state of being.
you're
So what
right.
are your thoughts on finding balance in life?
Oh yeah, that's a tough one for me. Balance is honestly one of those things that when you bring it up to most people and ask, is your life in balance or have you found balance? They'd look at you like, what? Balance? My life? No, because they say I'm too busy to have fun. I can't afford to go anywhere. I can't get the time off to go on vacation. There's too much work to do. I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to eat right. There's a million things that, in fact, we've all said it. I'm guilty as hell myself. And the list of excuses can go on, which all have to do with being out of control, which are being out of balance. So we're literally overcommitted and trapped within the confines of our own lives. And that lifestyle isn't healthy for any of us. And if it goes on for too long, you're completely out of balance and you're unhealthy. So for me, balance is hit and miss for sure. One moment, I feel like I'm firing on all cylinders and hitting all the marks for balance between my health, well being, trying to find time for family, get some friends in there, my relationship with John, trying to get work done. And then there's the chores. The chores are never ending out here, which of course, for an example for me, like last night, we didn't eat till 9 o'clock at night. And
Right.
that isn't good for my body, I can assure you. And it's not good for any of us, honestly, especially when you're so tired, you turn right around and you crash at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. It's not healthy. So I try so hard to find that balance. But when we have so much work to do, in work till the sun goes down, like a lot of folks, it's like, okay, when are you going to have time to actually eat right and take care of yourself? So, um, other times I'm struggling, of course, like crazy, like I just mentioned, like trying to chip away at the long list of things that need to be done. And in the midst of all of that, I have forgotten or I've made excuses because there's that, and I won't lie about that. I make excuses about my health and well-being, about I don't have time. And so it's a struggle for so many of us. And the question is, how do we find the time for a well-balanced life?
So how would you with all of that being said, how would you propose or how would you kind of advise us to start considering creating more balance in our lives?
Hmm. I don't think I'm qualified to advise anyone.
Well, I mean, what would your perception be as far as in the conversation? How
Yeah.
would we then, with all that you laid out, because you laid it out perfectly, as far as most of our lives are kind of running like that. We're
Yeah,
running in all different directions, and especially now, life isn't really slowing down. It's kind of speeding up. So
it
with all of
is.
that, yeah, with all of that in there, how would we start to consider and then create that balance?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, it's like being out of control of our own lives because life feels like it owns us instead of us making all the choices and the plans. So, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's like life is life, yet we get trapped in the confines of our own life and all the responsibilities that we lay on ourselves on a daily basis. And so then that's the question I posed earlier was how do you try to find balance when you're either literally buried or you have buried yourself? Because that's what it comes down to. It's very easy to bury ourselves and yet look up and go, "Ah, I don't have time." It's like, "Yeah, well, you did that to yourself." So it's kind of an
Right.
ironic thing, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
so I think we can serve ourselves best if we try to establish a realistic schedule. And I struggle with that every day. And that's no lie. I literally struggle in the ruts of my own crap that I place upon myself every day. So, like for example, wake up at the same time every day and do something mindful for you, which I try very hard to do. Like get up, do the usual routine. Don't instantly bury yourself in, oh, what's going on social media and what's doing this and that, because that just adds to your, oh, I got to do this and this, and you don't have to. You have to actually take time for yourself, like stretching, exercise, go for a walk. It's something for you that puts you as a priority first. Get that blood flow going. It's not only great for your health, but it's also great for your mental well-being, which in turn helps us focus better, which in turn helps us try to be more mindful of balance in some way. And it seems that if I waver on that routine for myself, my day is off from the get go. So, again, if I try to start it off the right way consistently, I can have more mindfulness for myself. So, balance is essential for a healthy life, but it sure isn't easy for us. And especially when we naturally put our health and well being on the back burner when we feel overwhelmed.
Oh,
You go
yeah.
100 miles an hour, the opposite direction. So, keep ourselves committed to a schedule that fulfills our needs. And that's the best that I could say. And it's a work in progress every day.
Right. I agree.
So, do you think that simply prioritizing our health and wellness within our daily schedule will make it easier for us to make our health a real priority? Like I mentioned before, it seems it's easy for us to put ourselves on the back burner when we feel out of balance, which in turn is why we feel out of balance. So, what are your thoughts on that, Jeanette?
Well, I believe I mean, obviously, we definitely should prioritize health and wellness in our daily lives. Creating routines around that subject specifically, I think is of great use. It seems odd, though, at the same time that we would need to schedule time each day to take care of ourselves. I mean, that just seems like such an odd concept. But sometimes it's the only way that we can ensure that that part of our life is even considered as part of the balance. For me,
Right.
balance is a hard thing to schedule, though, because it has to be so fluid. I feel that balance would be more beneficial to create in every moment. And for example, if my daily priorities are work, home and family life, and say I get a call from a family member who needs my immediate attention while I'm at work, how do I create balance in that type of scenario? And I don't want to be
Right.
thrown off course because something's out of balance in just that moment of time, because once that happens, sometimes it's hard for us to regain our balance. And
Right.
and I don't want to be thrown off every time something comes up. So if instead I see balance as that fluid concept, I can ask myself a couple of really quick questions, say, when that circumstance were to arise. If finding balance for me would be about making sure that I check in with myself and first see if my involvement in the circumstance with the family member is absolutely necessary. So that's step
Yeah.
one. That would be
Right.
a balanced perspective. If it is, I give myself then permission to stop what I'm working on, to go take care of the family needs, but knowing that I will return to the project at my work at my earliest convenience, say. So
Yeah.
at the same time I'm doing that, I also need to ask myself a couple questions like, have I eaten lately? Do I have a clear mind about what is happening? Have I left work, but I'm still thinking about work and not being present while I'm taking care of this circumstance? I mean, those are things that for me would lead me to create balance in a moment when obviously the situation is kind of pulling me out of that balance. So
Right.
yeah, there's that fluidity concept to it. And I was thinking about, kind of metaphorically, a gymnast can't think about balance while she's on the floor looking at the balance beam that she's going to perform on. She actually has to create balance in the present time when she gets up there. And it was kind
Mm.
of metaphorically, that's kind of the way that I'm trying to think about it, when I'm thinking about being able to create balance in general, like as a
Yeah.
regular thing, not just, well, when all the conditions are correct, I'll create balance. Well,
Right.
that's not balance. That's where we get all off course. So maybe thinking about balance this way could help us to feel more successful in creating it in our lives more often.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
thought. If we try too hard to schedule it out, I feel like every unexpected circumstance, which life seems to be filled with those,
Yeah.
would prevent us from being able to hold on to that schedule. And then we not only are out of balance, but then we start feeling things like guilt. We start feeling things like
Yeah.
shame. We start feeling extra emotions that are even worse, than
Yeah.
just being off
Right.
balance. Yeah. So checking in with ourselves often throughout a day to see if we have provided for our own needs like food, water, peace of mind, sleep. That's a great way to start creating balance. Then asking ourselves if there's anything like, say, weighing heavy on our minds that we're not attending to, like a work task or a commitment that we've made to a loved one to do something for them. With these two check ins, I believe we could find ourselves feeling more balanced just by taking care of anything that is currently needed without having some other aspect of our lives go completely off of the rails. Um,
Right.
yeah, often when I feel out of balance personally, it's because usually my own needs aren't being met in that moment, like food, sometimes I'm just hangry. And maybe sometimes there's just a mental shift in focus that I would prefer that again I'm just not attending to because I'm quote unquote busy. Like you said,
Right.
busy or just using the excuse of busy, who knows,
Right.
but
Right.
generally. Often when I feel out of balance, it's because my own needs for rest, food, or even sometimes just a mental shift in focus are not being met by me, which points me back to a part about creating balance that I feel is so important. We can only provide it for ourselves. That means we need to assess and reassess our lives consistently to ensure we are staying as close to balanced as possible.
Right. Yeah. I myself, I can assure you my needs are not being met when I'm traveling and away from home, which is my home base where my routine is pretty fluid. And speaking of that, just coming off of being gone for 3 more days and then feeling completely bogged down, not healthy, eating the wrong things, working nonstop, and going, "Okay, I'm depleted again." So, now back at home for a few more days, getting ready to leave again. So, for someone who travels often like me, it's like, what can we do to make sure we're still getting what we need to feel optimal while being away from home, which is away from the routine, away from the comfort zone, away from the fluidity? And how can we get enough rest, enough exercise, proper food, hydration when you find yourself running out of time and feeling unwell and in the mind, the body, the soul? And so obviously I'm feeling unbalanced right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a part of me that thinks that's the perfect time to evaluate what balance really means and how it does need to be more of a fluid concept. We can't control much about the external environments we find ourselves in, but we want to learn to balance the internal one. So first, we would have to consider that there's a big difference between a life in balance and a life in our comfort zone. When we are in our everyday lives, we get comfortable with our routines, yes, but that doesn't mean exactly that we're living balanced lives. Comfort zones are repetitive and predictable ways of being in the world, whether they are balanced or not. And often,
Mm,
if we really look at those things, they aren't in balance. Like our
right.
everyday lives aren't exactly as balanced as we think they are. But the repetition has caused us to feel kind of safe and in that comfort zone anyway.
Right.
So for me, when I think about your situation, I think when we are away from home, two things are likely to occur. First, we are likely to feel out of balance just because the repetitive patterns of our lives are being interrupted. And second, we would be noticing the difference between balance and off balance, I guess, because those patterns again are being interrupted. But the interruption is actually a door that we could use to the understanding about what our life's balance might really need to look like, which is really interesting to think about because I can understand what you're saying about just feeling so out of sorts
Yeah.
when you're kind of moving between the two, or when you're bouncing back and forth. So, if my everyday life looked something like waking up, getting ready for work, answering emails and calls while I'm getting ready for work, grabbing a snack on my way out the door to drive to work, getting to work, jumping right into meetings or tasks, taking a quick lunch, we get into that repetition. You can understand what I'm saying. We
Yep.
get into that space where every day kind of looks the same, and we never really stop to consider what is out of balance in just that morning that I just kind of, spit out. um, there's not a lot of balance. You're trying to get
Right.
ready, you're trying to do this, you're trying to catch that, you're trying to make sure this is done, you're trying to do that's not exactly balanced. It's repetition, but
Yes.
it's not exactly balance. So then if I go away from home and I leave my routine, I'm going to feel off balance just because I've shifted the routine. I've
Right.
interrupted it. Um, so I might find myself while I'm away spending all of my time away, wanting to get back to my daily routine just because it's familiar, again, not because
You're
it's
right.
balanced. And yeah, I think this is why I believe the balance needs to be created and maintained in the moment. If I'm at home and my routine feels balanced, that doesn't mean I will be out of balance if I'm not home. It just means balance will look different when I'm away. And that could, that means I will have to pay more attention to how I'm feeling in the moments. I'll have to check in with myself more. I won't have my routine to automatically fall into. It means balance will be even more fluid while I'm away. And it means I will learn more about myself and what balance really means to me in those two. Take an inventory of those two different situations and really kind of start working your balance in in the contrast between the two. I
Right.
would think that's where you'd really see it, because our repetitive lives, we just forget that balance is even a concept,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Well, I like when you talk about there's the familiarity, and then there's the routine, and then there's the comfort zones, and it's easy to mistake those things for what you perceive as balance.
Right.
And
I can assure you, like, with my body more than anything, when I'm away from home and I'm bouncing between here in Nevada and Idaho, you have to, there's commitments that need to be met. You
Mhm.
know, I've got to go see my parents. I've got to go see, oh, of course, I'm going to see my kids and then my grandbaby. And then, you know, there's John's side. We try to balance that at times. And then you're bouncing beds and there's no quiet time to do the morning meditations. There's no healthy foods because you're bouncing so much unless you pack it with you. And boy, I'll tell you, my body tells me right away between the inflammation, the uh, backed up feeling without getting
Right.
too too colorful. Everything just feels off, and so I have got to figure out how to be able to find a balance with the traveling, the bouncing, and the mind body thing because it really affects me in ways that is not healthy. And prior to a couple years ago or less, I didn't really pay much attention to it because I wasn't being mindful like I am now. I wasn't aware like I am now, and I wasn't really paying attention to my body and my mind and everything like I am now. But boy, howdy, it's difficult. So and I get homesick in between that as well. The homesickness can really affect the feeling of being out of balance because this is my home. The mountains, the time with John, the rides in the mountains, the going out and taking pictures and things like that that I love that make me feel balanced. It may not necessarily be balanced, but everything works better for me and my routine is more fluid and it's just gosh, it's a very difficult thing to find the balance.
I
So,
can imagine. Yeah.
oh, yeah, and I would probably be feeling crappy and not really thinking about it as much if I wouldn't have started this journey for myself a year and a half ago or whatever it was. So, in between all of that, I think balance is definitely different for all of us, what we perceive as balance, whether it is the comfort zone, it is this. For them, it's what works where they feel the most calm and the most centered, I guess. And if it is being home, that's their balance, so to speak, if you want to call it that. It's a routine. And um, I'm gonna start looking real hard at a more balanced life for myself, and I started that journey already, but it takes more time, it takes more planning, it takes the ability as soon as you either roll into town, you know, go straight to the store and buy healthy foods and buy the you know, make sure you're hydrated like you mentioned earlier. There's that ease to just go into Maverick and buy a breakfast burrito and a big tall Pepsi and start your day. Well, I used to do that a lot just because of the
Right.
ease, but now
Mhm.
I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna do that anymore. And it's funny, you and I've had this conversation a few times about food can be so wonderful because it's so yummy and it's just fun to explore and try new things and all that. But then I think you and I have an agreement on how we feel with food, how it can also be not the enemy, but it's like that woodpecker on the brain constantly telling you, that ain't healthy. Oh, but I'm gonna have it anyway. Or, boy, it just sounds good right now. What's once? Once isn't gonna harm you. Or I'm gonna grab this and go. And when you're depleted on both ends of the spectrum because you're not taking care of yourself and you're in a situation where it's grab and go, it's easy to have that love-hate relationship with food because out of necessity you have to have something and you don't have time for the good. So you grab the bad. So
Well,
again,
and
trying
I
to be
think
more mindful.
yeah, and I think it's interesting because while you were saying that, what was coming across for me was it's amazing how often we beat ourselves up. We have to take care of these external responsibilities. It's almost like there's a part of us who really just wants our attention. And in that sense, there's kind of that tension between I'm committed to myself under certain conditions. I struggle committing to myself under these other conditions, but it's almost like that's what we're supposed to be learning. You
Mm,
know, we're supposed to be learning. We can be, especially at this age, it's part of the part of the transition through that midlife from being a mom to being a caretaker for ourselves. I mean, this is what we're learning.
right,
And I think that what we're talking about kind of falls perfectly in there as far as now's the time to make those commitments. Now's the time to keep those commitments. And we might finally get to learn that we can care for us and take care of these external responsibilities simultaneously. But I think at first that tension, like you said, you get into the hurry, you get into the, you're at the gas station already. There's all these things, or you're at someone else's house and it's easy to reach for whatever they eat
right,
versus paying attention and just thinking it through. And I think that's part of us falling back into old conditioned patterns and responses.
right,
It's about balance, but more about commitment to knowing that we can take care of ourselves while we are doing these other things. I mean, so many people at our age find themselves going from, no longer being a mom, like empty nest, to caring for aging parents. You know, that doesn't mean we have to fall by the wayside.
right.
We just have to keep sacrificing all of our own health, all of our own well-being. It means we're finding ourselves in circumstances where we now get to create that balance.
Yeah,
And maybe we haven't done it consistently enough that it's become the pattern. And so, like for you, that constant moving back and forth is just another need for you to pay really close attention to this time being about you and them. I mean, we don't really have that thought as a mom. It's
no.
just them. It's
It's
just
true.
them.
Yeah, it's true. It is,
Yeah,
and it's mind-blowing sometimes. It's almost like a crippling feeling I get sometimes of, "Don't forget about you.
right.
Why do you have to just overdo this or overdo that and then overcompensate here and all that, and then yet you forget about you?" I mentioned earlier when we were talking, earlier in this podcast about how we put ourselves on the back burner. We
Right.
put ourselves, on the back burner when there's not enough time or you're trying to, I mean, that for me, like, there's company coming, turbo, I can't work out this morning. I can't do this morning. I can't. And it's like, I've got 4 hours until they're here. Oh, but I've gotta. It's crazy that I don't know if it's like over responsible. I don't know what you call it, but it has to do with being a mom. I think that
Mhm.
it's this innate thing inside us women that you just have this thing that's like, I've got to take care of everyone, everything but me. And
Right.
it's really interesting how that works. And it's a battle. It's like this inner voice of, you need to do this. Oh, I don't have time. But you have to because you skipped 2 days because you were traveling. But I don't have time. I gotta. And it's, I mean, wow. Like, what the hell? God made some pretty amazing things, but dang, that thing inside of us is it's powerful.
It is. And it's definitely, you said it perfectly, as far as we do it to ourselves. I mean, it's a pattern that we set up for ourselves, but there's a purpose for it. It's kind of like the patterns that we download as children. Before the age of 7, we download because we're in a hypnotic state. But the things that we decide before we're age 7, the things that we program ourselves with don't serve us as 25, 35, 45, 55-year-old adults. They
Yeah.
don't work the same. It's kind of like a mechanism that no longer has the same function. So when somebody hands you a baby and you have no skills, because you don't have parenting skills before you become a parent, I mean, they're just not floating around in the ether and you just pick them up as you go, you know so you get this child and there's a functionality to the the repetitive patterning that we develop to raise children, to keep them safe, to care for them. There's a purpose to that repetitive pattern. And I think midlife is that push where it says, no more. Now it's time for you. And
Right.
when you listen to the statistics about heart attacks and heart disease and women dying from that, I can kind of theorize as to how that works, because at the time when life starts pushing back into them saying, now you, which is
Yeah.
graceful and beautiful. And at the same time, we keep the same program,
Right.
but I'm going to keep the same functionality, and it no longer
Exactly.
functions.
Well,
Yeah.
how do you undo all of that?
I think,
Years of
yeah,
that. It's like, really, you expect me to just flip the tables and look at me and go, "Okay, girl, it's all you now."
yeah.
It's like, duh,
I
that's
think it's
impossible.
exactly, and it is, and I think that's that. I mean, I've talked about this forever in my life. You know how they talk about the still small voice that you were offered. I think that the universe has a way of kind of, whispering to you, take care of yourself now.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon life has a little more of a stern take care of you now. Like maybe you start to have a few kind of health hiccups, or circumstances that start to struggle. And then the universe has a way of kind of getting louder and louder and louder as far as it's time for
Yeah.
you. And if we just don't, so there's a grace period, and we can slowly turn those patterns, but we have to be mindful of them occurring so that we can keep just shifting them a little bit and a little bit. It's not like we have to flip a switch, although it feels like it's necessary and what we should do.
Right.
Yeah, it's more like practice makes perfect. We didn't become parents overnight. I
Right.
mean, we did in a actual way, but not internally. But it was the repetitive pattern. So we almost need to start learning how to parent ourselves the same way. Now it's taking care of us.
Mm,
And I think it does take a process, because, we spend 20, if you have multiple kids, you could spend 20, almost 30 years as a parent,
right.
and then it's just over.
Yeah. And it's all you, girl, and you're like, "What? No, I
Exactly.
don't know what you mean. I haven't taken care of myself in 20 years." Yeah, it is.
Right.
It's crazy. It's literally, it's kinda comical in a way, and I my hat goes off to those gals that are really good at not only raising children, but simultaneously self-care at the same
Yeah.
time, and I had my moments over those years of raising the girls where I would, do something for myself, or, a random massage, but it was never out of comfort, it was about because I was hurting. So,
Right.
but these gals that can do both, I'm like, "Yeah, girl, I'm jealous because
Right.
I just didn't have that." My focus was 100% there, and work and house and relationship, and it's always like pieces of you going in 15 different directions, and now it's like the undoing of all of that, but still balancing, of course, the family time and the kid time, the grandkid time, the parent time, whatever it is. And it's a work in progress. It's full-time work in progress, and that little voice inside my head is relentless because it keeps me accountable, but there are times I argue back and say, "I don't have time."
Or just
I don't.
disregard. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Just
yeah.
disregard the message. Hmm.
Exactly. But,
Yeah.
wow. Well, this was a great conversation, and I know it's probably gone a little long, and we've had some interesting crickets in the background and
Buffers.
vehicles and a little different sound, but it's a great conversation, and, we hope after listening to this today that you'll now have some tools and some better ideas on how to find a more balanced life for your own health and well-being. So, think of this quote by Sadhguru: "There is no such thing as work life balance. It is all life. The balance has to be within you." But thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Mahogany and Willow.
because there's always something important to talk about.